Hello, I'm Brian Fox. Welcome to I Hate Rock Music. And one of the reasons I love rock music is groups like Blue Cheer. And in this video, I'm just going to talk about the classic power trio. I'll do a separate video on the other various incarnations of Blue Cheer. I consider them a pretty separate entity. But as far as a classic power trio, they don't get any more classic than Blue Cheer. And unlike their contemporaries like the Jimi Hendrix Experience and Cream, there was a little lower technical capability, and they were just pummeling. They made up for dexterity with just being so brutal, such an onslaught. And so all these discussions over the years about who invented or originated heavy metal can be laid to rest. Blue Cheer are definitely the ones who laid the blueprint, and one of the reasons why we know that is because a set of 1967 demos came out. So they're the year before Blue Cheer's first album. And they have Second Time Around, 10 Minutes of Dr. Please, and Summertime Blues. And if one could say this, they're even more brutal and insane than what ended up coming out on the records, which is really saying something. So we're talking about the original Blue Cheer power trio: Paul Whaley on drums, Leigh Stevens on guitar, and Dickie Peterson on bass and vocals. And even Jim Morrison said that they were the most powerful band that he'd ever seen. And he saw a lot of loud bands. I'm sure Blue Cheer must have made an impression. And they were purported to be the loudest band in the world at the time. And I can vouch for that. When I was 11, this is a pretty crazy story. My best friend's the boyfriend of his sister, so my best friend in 1968 on my birthday, took me to Eagles Auditorium here in Seattle to see Blue Cheer in 1968, in August of 1968. And I was already a big fan of Summertime Blues. I loved a lot of stuff on the radio, but Summertime Blues definitely struck me as totally heavy. And I liked a lot of really hard rock bands at the time when I was a tender age of 11, including Steppenwolf. But Blue Cheer were in a class by themselves. So I was really molded to really love super heavy music starting in 1968. And I went to that show, and I have to say, I never could imagine bigger stacks of amps and the sheer volume of it. To a little kid like me, it was absolutely insane. It was felt so dangerous. I thought I was going to be physically harmed. It was so loud. And of course, I was surrounded by a bunch of hippies and hippie wannabes, and there's pot smoke everywhere. I didn't even know what pot was. It just smelled like vanilla to me, but incredible experience, and it helped change my life. I was never quite the same after seeing Blue Cheer live in '68. I'm glad to say that I did. And so we have that classic power trio. They started out. Uh, they were a spinoff of a band called Oxford Circle, that include Dickie Peterson, Paul Whaley, and Gary Lee Yoder, who will show up in the band again later. But they were a fixture on the local scene in San Francisco, 1966. And in fact, there's a famous Captain Beefheart poster that has the Oxford Circle opening for Captain Beefheart. And then the story goes that Blue Cheer, after seeing, or Oxford Circle, after seeing Hendrix at Monterey, they decided that was the way to go. So the first incarnation of Blue Cheer was actually Dickie Peterson, Leigh Stevens, a drummer named Eric Albranda, and Dickie Peterson's brother, Verva Peterson, on guitar, and a guy named Vale Hamanaka on keyboards. And then after they saw Hendrix, they said, "You guys got to go. We're going to be a power trio." So it became the classic Dickie Peterson, Paul Whaley, Gary Lee Yoder lineup. And Summertime Blues came out. I heard it on the radio all the time. I'm not surprised it was number 14 in the Billboard charts. And when the first album came out, Vincebus Eruptum in 1968, was number 11 in the national charts, which is really surprising. I mean, it's a pretty brutal record. And uh, they did a lot of blues classics like Parchment Farm and Rock Me Baby and the like, and then they had their originals, Dr. Please and Out of Focus and all that crazy stuff, and there really isn't anything like it. and they were recognized for their brutality early on. But with a big hit like that, they even showed up on American Bandstand. There's a video clip of it. I'll put all this stuff below as usual. There's a couple of great video clips of them and some poorly recorded live material, but we're lucky to have it. It's too bad we don't have a really great uh, live recording of them, but essentially the records were recorded live with embellishments. So Vince Abyss Eruption came out, and then later in 1968, Outside Inside came out, and for me, Outside Inside is the total classic. The band had obviously developed more. Leigh Stevens' guitar playing had improved, and the material was a lot better. And of course, except for I Can't Get No Satisfaction and The Hunter, two covers, which they do wonderful justice to. They had some great originals, and of course, Just a Little Bit and Come and Get It were both issued as singles. They didn't do as well as Summertime Blues, and I'm not surprised. They're really brutal, even by today's standards. They are just incredible, and the Paul Whaley's drumming is something to hear. He must have really pounded the shit out of those drums, and there's a lot of great overdubs on Outside Inside, and there's a lot of extra instrumentation like keyboards and the like that really give the album a lot of covers, but it's totally damaged. I mean, the cover alone, this is the CD version, you can tell there's going to be trouble. And I love the fact that when you open it up, it's got an astonishing picture of them live. I mean, look at those stacks of amps, and just incredible. And so, as a power trio, they really are a total legend. Of course, Dickie Peterson, um, after going through a lot of permutations of different versions of Blue Cheer, showed up again in '74 and all through the '70s and '80s and beyond. Kept Blue Cheer trios going. But I'm going to focus in on the original power trio because for me that's where the money is. And the fact they did this material in 1967 and 1968 is really incredible. There really isn't anybody else like them. And it's kind of funny because, of course, Dickie Peterson kept Blue Cheer alive with all these different kinds of different lineups and different sounds that they produced on the records after these power trio records. Paul Whaley stayed for I think at least two more albums, and Leigh Stevens, he's the real wacky one. I guess he uh, basically left the band because he didn't do drugs, and everybody else did. So too bad. It sure sounds like he did drugs when you hear his playing, but he left that band. He did a couple of solo records, Red Weather, which was released in the U.S., and then A Cast of Thousands, which was only released in the U.K. And they're interesting records, very eclectic. Certainly not much to do with Blue Cheer, but with a whole host of, particularly on A Cast of Thousands. There's the Cast of Thousands. He plays with a lot of UK luminaries, so he was quite a hero over there. Then he ended up being in this weird band, I think about 72 or 3, called Pilot, that had one album on RCA, and it was pretty weak, middle of the road rock. Once again, it doesn't remind you at all of the work of Leigh Stevens. And then uh, after that, or around the same time, he ended up in this weird band on National General Records, and with a crazy lineup, had Mick Waller from the Jeff Beck Group on drums, and Pete Sears on keyboards, a very well-known keyboard player, and then a pretty cool single called Silver Meter. And it's a strange record. It actually has several Elton John, Bernie Taupin songs on it, well before Elton John was very well known. But it's got some real stompers, Cocklewood Monster and the like, that are definitely harken back to Blue Cheer. His playing had improved, and they're pretty hair raising. It's too bad the whole record wasn't as hair raising as that. Otherwise, I wholeheartedly recommend it. And then a Silver Meter live at the Fillmore um, bootleg is out there, and it includes a studio outtake of Train Kept a Rollin' from the Silver Meter album sessions, and then their live show, and it was pretty much like their their record, of course, without the low key songs, pretty rockin' affair. But so Leigh Stevens did have one more flash of dissonant, noisy guitar wrangling on Silver Meter. But the two Blue Cheer albums really stand alone and are rightfully considered legendary classics at this point. Dickie Peterson's voice is very distinct. Nobody will ever forget Summertime Blues, and Outside Inside is certainly one of the most damaged heavy rock records ever made. So my hat's off to Blue Cheer. They certainly changed my life. I'm a lucky man to have seen them, and it's pretty cool that we have at least a handful of material, the two albums by the original band, and then some cool video clips, and then some shitty live recordings. But at least when you hear the live recordings, as bad as they are, you can definitely tell that they were total motherfuckers live, incredibly loud and incredibly powerful. And as I mentioned, very unfortunately, especially considering the popularity of the band, it's pretty amazingly we don't have any reasonably well recorded soundboard recordings. We've got lots of soundboard recordings of a lot of other bands of that era that played clubs like the Avalon. But there it is, a moment in time that will never happen again, and two Blue Cheer albums that we'll never hear anything like again. I'm Brian Fox. Thanks for watching I Hate Rock Music.